what America was and what it can become. This is Liberty Town Hall.
Thanks for being with us today. I'm Greg Marshall. Here's Glenn Wilson. We appreciate you being here. Big show scheduled for today. We're going to talk about language. Now that sounds silly. I didn't like language when I was in school, Greg. Well, neither did I, but I'm glad I took it. I'm glad I was able to somewhat master it. You'll notice it's not perfect, but none of us are, I suppose. But what we're going to try to do today is think about the idea of if you change what a word means, what does that do for an individual, for a society? Sometimes nothing. And there's great examples of word changes and additions to the language that actually help, that actually have made a difference, made things easier to understand. Yet at the same time, there's some words that just a minor change has changed our society, has changed the world as we know it, the people around us. And that's the kind of thing we're going to talk about today. Dr. Gary Biggs will be joining us. He's going to explain that in detail, and I think you're going to find it interesting. So I hope that you'll be a part of it. Glenn, I think it's going to be a pretty good one.
Greg, people need to understand where it affects us in the Constitution, where it affects us in our homes and our business. Everything we do is based on everyone understanding the same meaning of a word. And when you change the word's meaning, for example, gay used to be joyful, happy, just outgoing, a good person that was always happy, bubbly, right? Mm-hmm. And now gay is homosexual. Well, how do you say it's great to be gay in America, meaning happy, if now all of a sudden your meaning has changed? So when you go back and you read something that says someone was gay, someone was joyful, if they just use the word gay without associating joyful with it, then you'd almost think that that person was a homosexual. That's a big problem when you're trying to follow continuity from one issue to the next. So I think Dr. Biggs talking about this and how it relates to our fundamentals for not only the Constitution, but in our morals as well. I think Dr. Biggs really got a good segment going on this, and I can't wait for people to see this. So, I don't know, Greg, you think we can find a way to quit changing the words?
I don't know, or we at least better find out a way to keep up with it in a way that makes a lot more sense than what we've done with society. Let me give you a minor example of what we're talking about. If you ever get a chance to, watch shows like It's a Wonderful Life, the old movie that really didn't go anywhere when it was released, but since NBC started airing it on television, it changed the world as far as Christmas movies go. Or maybe go search for an old episode on the internet, Flash Gordon or Dick Tracy, or the early Batman or Superman serials. I mean, and check out how the language was presented then, how people spoke, just even in that relatively short amount of time from the 30s and 40s until the early 2010s. And you'll be amazed at the differences you hear in presentation, content, and discussion compared to where we are today. And I hate to say it, I'm not so sure where it's changing the language as far as dumbing it down or collapsing the language to a weaker extent.
I got a couple things to say, but I want people to see the interview with Dr. Biggs first. But I want to follow up on this when we're done. So we'll be right back with more Liberty Town Hall.
Stop switching back and forth between drill bits and driver heads. Bo Ryle's here for the halftime drill driver, the innovative new way to drill, flip, and drive in only 5 seconds. You'll never have to change a bit in the middle of a job again. And you can go from drilling to driving, Phillips to flat, any combination for any task. The breakthrough, our patent-pending swivel head that flips and locks, giving you precision performance from drilling to driving in seconds. You get the halftime drill driver for only $19.95. I'll even include 4 Phillips heads, 4 flat, and 4 drill bits, no charge. Call now and receive this durable carry case free. Call or click right this minute and get a second complete set free. Just pay separate processing and handling. You get it all for the low, low price of just $19.95.
To order halftime drill driver for $19.95 plus processing and handling, call 1-800-374-7875 or log on to gethalftime.com.
I'm a little alarmed today, probably more so than anyone else I'm hearing. Many folks are up in arms about the condition of our country and they're concerned that it's a political problem. Well, the political side of it is merely exacerbated by the underlying issue. If you change the word, you change the world. The prevailing pollution of putrid pundacity is causing a smokescreen that can be hidden behind by the left, the elusive left, and the conspiring cluster who change words to say the same thing essentially that Lenin said. Lenin put it this way. He often said that capitalist dupes will sell us the rope with which to hang them. He called us useful idiots. Now bear in mind, Lenin didn't speak English, but rather he spoke Russian, and therefore this probably isn't an exact quote, and our degradation process has probably softened it quite a bit. Now let me mention that we're not only talking about slang, but about a degradation in general of meanings, and that happens by constant gradual usage in an erroneous manner. For example, come and go markets have KUMNGO on their banners and signs. This is called type redirection. That causes a misspelling problem in children as they learn to say different words different ways. They don't follow the rules. Can you remember when bad meant something wasn't good? Now it's used to mean exactly the opposite. It's used as a positive appraisal. We've had other things interjected in our language like, don't, thank you, Mr. Simpson. Like, everything's like, not everything is a comparison. I'm like, and you know, I like, and you're like. The word duh, I get a little tired of that myself. Whatever, talk to the hand, and kids don't even use English anymore. Sometimes the young ones say, I don't know, and that's English translation is I do not know. Cool used to mean not hot. Now it means really fashionable. Hot meant the temperature was exceeding. Now it has a fashion or sexual connotation. Gay used to mean happy. Now it means homosexual. Not to mention the continual assault on grammar and language that the advent of texting refers to. Let me make reference here to an article in the Iowa State Daily Wire by Darren Klein from the Iowa State University. He says, and I'll just read his article quickly, when did Vinny and Pauly D replace Webster and Roget? Popular words and phrases always change from decade to decade and generation to generation. In recent years, however, our generation has contributed to the, I like his term, degradation of the English language. There's a growing push to have more Americans become bilingual. But how can we be expected to do that when we can barely master our spoken English? Instead of expanding our vocabularies and aiming for eloquence, our verbal skills are being focused on being hip and slovenly. We may not use any longer the term sit on it, necking, or daddy-o, but the slew of recent terms that have arisen in the past few years would make the script of Clueless sound like a Thoreau poem. Bro, broski, or bra, if we cross paths out on the town and I don't know you, this is not an acceptable form of introduction. This rule applies also to dude or chief, but that's what they're used. When I go to Hy-Vee, he says, and ask for help, I expect to find a helpful smile in every aisle, not someone directing me where to go followed by the term dog, awesome, or sick. At some point in time, these became the only two adjectives used to describe anything at all. Everything you saw, did, or accomplished last week was not sick or awesome. At least awesome was meant to be used in a positive light, but when did something being sick magnify or signify glory? Facepalm, fail, epic fail. Perhaps the slang for which I have the most personal contempt, he says, is this collection of terms that has become so ubiquitous, that's a word most people don't know, ubiquitous among young adults, outsiders, and outsiders would think all we do is fail. Obama's stimulus plan may have been an epic fail, may have been, but an attempt to ride a laundry basket down a set of stairs hardly qualifies as an epic in any sense of the word. TXT speak, text speak. It's acceptable on Facebook, Twitter, and in a text message, not during conversation. Prime example of our current level of laziness is speaking with text abbreviations. This is an insult to the expanse that is the English language. Is it much harder to use the full words instead of LOL, IDK, or TTLY, or TTYL, laugh out loud, I do not know, or talk to you later? Movie quotes involve degradation. He says, who doesn't love Napoleon Dynamite? I don't. Anchorman, haven't seen it. Or the Hangover movies, don't even know what they are. They are comedy staples, he says, and some of the funniest films in our era. Nonetheless, No matter how funny Will Ferrell or Zach Galifianakis may be, every one-liner they delivered has a shelf life. Let's let those expire. Like, the epitome of squalid verbal talent. Not like in the sense of a Facebook status, but like in the sense of every other word of an unprepared class presentation, where like, every like, other word like comes out minced between likes. Everybody hears it, everybody hates it, but more and more are using it. Yet no one makes an effort to stop it. Here I am. Popular culture is added to the common parlance, but does it degrade language? According to Tortuguita 1877 photo bucket, words are beautiful things. They can make us stop and think or motivate us to action. They evoke emotion or anger. Words and language evolve and grow so that we may better ourselves, not so we can regulate them. Unfortunately, our vernacular gives a representation of time. In 2001, Merriam-Webster added bromance and tweet to their official collection, along with the pop culture definition of a cougar. And all this time, I thought it was a wild animal in the woods. While we remember dictionaries as a reference for expanding vocabularies, their basis for inclusion is usage. Thus, eroding the quality and simplicity of commonly used words has forced the utmost authorities in language to select these putrid terms. The president of Webster is even called fist bump as the champion of the group. Well, I'm going to pick up the rest of this in just a second. We'll be back in a minute.
United States senators create laws that affect all Americans. In Michigan, the old parties are running Senate candidates who will sink you into endless debt, embark on costly foreign crusades, and violate your freedom. These policies have created the current economic depression. I'm Scotty Bowman, and I pledge to end deficit spending, restore the Constitution, and put your freedom first. Help me fight for you by making a contribution at scottybowman.org. I'm Scotty Bowman, candidate for United States Senate, and I've approved this advertisement.
Rose City Drug, your one-stop pharmacy, home health care, medical supplies, photo processing, and gift headquarters. The pharmacy department fills your prescriptions utilizing a state-of-the-art robotic system, lowering the time you wait with much higher accuracy, and your medication is never touched by human hands. The home health care and medical supplies department has a complete line of diabetic supplies and aids, including a full line of diabetic shoes. Rose City Drug, family-owned and operated for over 20 years, just south of the Rose City city limits, 2640 North M33.
Thank you for coming back with us here. I want to finish up this matter of change the word, change the world. Slang terms come and go, and some terms are inescapable, and it's difficult not to let a few slip. In fact, they may even be popular, but that doesn't mean they're fashionable. Take pride in eloquence and use some originality in your speech. It takes a little effort, but it shows intelligence. According to Christian Science Monitor, staff writer David Rode, he filed this report in 2003 from Sydney, Australia, on the way the English is spreading, changing other languages, and being changed by them in what he says internet speed. He says the tension between standard English and hybrid Englishes are going to become very, very great. And he goes on a little further and talks about such examples of the fact that to many non-English speaking computer hackers, a computer term such as hardware has only one meaning: computer components. They take no thought of the idea that it may have been a store or a hardware that goes on cabinets or things to help with it. So it is degrading. But let me take you to my most urgent, or at least ways alarming, example of this matter of degradation of English language. Now, this isn't a current event, but it came to me currently, and it was an interview with Ezra Klein at the Washington Post. It was on MSNBC. It was posted December 30th, 2010. And the interviewer brings up at the time, the upcoming intention of reading the Constitution in the Congressional Record. Then the question comes, is this a gimmick, she said. Mr. Klein answers, yes, it's a gimmick. I mean, you could say two things about it. It has no binding power on anything. The issue of the Constitution is not that people don't read the text and think they're following. The issue of the Constitution is that the text is confusing because it was written over 100 years ago, and what people believe it says differs from person to person and differ depending upon what they want to get done. So I wouldn't expect too much coming out of this. It breaks back to the interviewer, and she says, now listen to her English usage. She's a professional national television interviewer, and she says, except that the Tea Party has sort of used this to say, you know, we've got to follow the Constitution. I mean, they're constantly talking about it to say it's a way our government is run amok. And yet the new Speaker of the House, and she's going to mention here that Speaker Boehner confused the Declaration of Independence and the preamble of the Constitution. And many people do that, by the way, but it doesn't mean his English was degraded. Then Mr. Klein goes to this. He says the new rules require that every bill state the constitutional authority it claims. Then we get to see where he actually wants to go. He brings up health care, and he says, Obamacare is the only bill that actually states where it gets its constitutional authority. And here he goes to another proof of my premise that the degraded English language is demonstrated here. Klein says this, the normal reading of the Commerce Clause, at least in our era, so he admits that what the Founding Fathers said and what we're doing with it mean two entirely different things. In our era, is that the sort of unified nation like we are, I thought we were pretty well unified. The government has fairly expansive power to make sure that the interstate commerce works efficiently. He says then, the healthcare market is largely a federal market. Now, I want to insert here, if I could, the second thing that he does. The Washington Post Ezra Klein says later on in a second interview, my friends on the right don't like to hear this, but the Constitution is not a clear document. Written 100 years ago when America had 13 states and very different problems, it rarely speaks directly to the questions we ask it. The problem is because we're speaking a different language. If I spoke to you in a language you'd never learned, you wouldn't understand what I said either. This morning, and then he goes on, he says, this morning I gave a quick interview to MSNBC where I made, I thought, some fairly banal points on the GOP's plan to honor the Constitution by having it read aloud on the House floor. Asked if it was a gimmick, I replied that it was, because, well, it is. It's our founding document, not a spell that makes the traitors among us glow green. It's also, I noted, a completely non-binding act. It doesn't impose a particular interpretation of the Constitution on legislators and will have no practical impact on how they legislate. Because he didn't use succinct English, it was misunderstood that he was trying to say, as he comes back in his later interview, that he intended to say that reading the Constitution into the congressional record had no binding act. But he came off as saying the Constitution had no binding effect. The Constitution does have a binding effect. The problem is our language has been degraded to the point that our younger people and the generation in charge now seems to think it has no binding effect because they don't want it to. Now, I'd like to, if I could, bring a little biblical perspective in here. As a pastor, I try to bring that in where I can. 2 Timothy 3:15 says, study to show yourself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. Schools have been slowly reducing the emphasis placed on English and raising it on other things and other languages. The everybody gets a participation medal mentality only reinforces the don't stress the details situation that has brought us to the statement that our Constitution is confusing because it's old. No, the Constitution is not confusing. We're confused because we've stepped away from the very language in which it was written. We have failed to maintain a biblical mandate to study to show ourselves approved, and now we find ourselves ashamed. Again, I would reiterate my assertion that we will not see our government fixed with only a constitutionalist approach, especially when we can't even understand it because some generations haven't studied the language it's written in. After all, God told us to study. If we'd been doing so, we would not be in the shape we're in. Our recourse, get back to the Constitution and the book from which it derives its authority. A good place to begin this repair would be in the schools and homes in the language of our young people. Use some pride and elegance and use the language we were given. Thank you.
It's been called the best concert ever. It's the 25th anniversary Rock and Roll Hall of Fame concert.
God bless you, please, Mrs. Robinson.
Featuring classic performances by the biggest names in rock and roll together on one stage. Now available on Blu-ray and DVD for just $39.99. And if you call in the next 10 minutes, we'll ship it for free. Don't miss out. Call now.
Call 1-800-472-8619 to order the 25th Anniversary Rock and Roll Hall of Fame concerts on 3 DVDs for $39.99 and receive free shipping when you call in the next 10 minutes with your credit card.
Boy, you can learn a lot listening to Dr. Biggs. I appreciate you standing by and continuing on with us today. And he's a great contributor to the program. I'm sure that you've received a nice little education. I know I sure did by just checking out this episode. Good quality stuff that I hope you'll share with people. That's a big thing. Take what you learned from this program and do two things with it. Number one, go check it out yourself. We live in the age of information like as none has existed before. I can remember when I first started in the radio business back in 1982. You couldn't find out hardly anything compared to what you can find out today. I think that's one of the biggest advantages we have of the information age, but yet it's one of the biggest deterrents. There's so much information now that some people get fogged in the head and don't bother to check it out because why do I want to do all this digging? Because there's so much to read as opposed to so little. But try to maybe take it in little bites and slowly but surely grow on this. And once you've found out what we're saying and whether it's true or not, why don't you go take it and share it with others? Let's try to make a difference and try to grow this knowledge and grow our country in response to it, Glenn.
Greg, I'm concerned about what we're teaching the kids in school on vocabulary. I'm a little concerned about the slang out on the street. As these words change meaning, I think we actually lose our tie back to the original wording of the Constitution and what it means there.
You keep your pocket one handy.
I always have my Constitution handy because I'm not smart enough to remember everything in the Constitution, so I always keep it handy to look it up. But if you change the words, like the Second Amendment, shall not be infringed. Well, if you don't know what the word infringed means, how are you going to know if it's being infringed? So we can eliminate rights by softening what it means to infringe. It used to be that if I violated your rights in any way, that was an infringement on your rights. Now it's okay because infringement's a softer word now. It doesn't carry the same meaning, right, Greg? That's the importance of words to me, is it's our only way of commonly communicating one message evenly across to everybody. That separates us, I think, from most other species right off the bat, is we have a language that allows information to go from one person to the next back and forth. And if we change our meaning all the time, then how do I communicate to you and carry that meaning on through? And I think that's what Dr. Biggs was trying to focus on, is keep the words the same. I don't know any other way to do it, but we've got to correct some of the words. I think we've got to go back and refound the meaning of some of these words, I guess, is what I'm looking for there, Greg.
Well, I think what you're trying to say here, too, is these people who walk around, and there are some that do, and say the Constitution is a living document. Let me explain what that means. That sounds good on the surface. Oh, it's alive, it's powerful. What a living document, as laws mean, is that means it can change definition based on the current society that exists. We don't want and cannot stand for the possibility of seeing different definitions from what the founders envisioned. That's what the court system is supposed to look at. What did the founders envision when they wrote this, whatever this is? And they were supposed to interpret that. They have long since stopped doing that. A recent example is Obamacare, where we decide, well, let's just change the definitions, change what this means, change this thought, and now it's all of a sudden illegal. The court system has a right to do that. Nobody talked about what the founders would have envisioned with that, and that's their job, Glenn.
That's the sole purpose of the Supreme Court, is to interpret the founding fathers or the founding principles of our government and our Constitution, and to make sure that the laws coming out of Congress match that. So if you mix words, like Obamacare, like you said, they passed it saying it wasn't a tax, it's not a tax, it's not a tax. Well, then they come out to the Supreme Court and said, nah, you can do this as long as it's a tax. Well, that's deceit right there. So even changing the meaning of the word tax has come into play in this Obamacare issue, right?
Absolutely, it is. We're all out of time right now. Thanks for watching. This is Liberty Town Hall.
Children should be educated and instructed in the principles of freedom. Defense of the Constitution, John Adams, 1787.